In the heart of a vast and ancient forest, there was a small, enchanted village named Elderglen. The village lay nestled in a valley surrounded by towering trees that seemed to touch the clouds. These weren't ordinary trees. Their trunks were as wide as houses, their bark glimmered faintly in the moonlight, and their leaves whispered secrets to those who listened carefully. Elderglen was home to a community of kind and curious people. Among them was a young boy named Arlen, who was 10 years old. Arlen had a mop of messy brown hair, curious hazel eyes, and a mischievous smile that hinted at his love for adventure. He lived with his grandmother, Ira, a wise woman known for her deep knowledge of the forest and its many mysteries. Every night before bed, Ira would tell Arlen stories about the Whispering Forest. She would speak of the gentle dryads who lived in the trees, the mischievous will-o'-the-wisps who played tricks on travelers, and the ancient guardian who watched over the forest from its heart. The forest, she would say, is alive with magic. But remember, it only shares its secrets with those who are brave, kind, and true of heart. Arlen loved these tales. "Gran," he said one evening, clutching the edge of his quilt, "do you think I could ever meet the guardian? Or see the forest heart?" Ira chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Perhaps one day, my little explorer. The forest has a way of choosing those it trusts." "Do you think the guardian is real?" Arlen asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Some say the guardian is just a story," Ira replied with a twinkle in her eye. "But I believe the forest always has a protector. Whether or not you meet them depends on your courage and heart." Arlen drifted off to sleep, dreaming of shimmering lights and ancient trees. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves turned hues of gold and crimson, Arlen woke to find the village buzzing with excitement. Several villagers had reported seeing a strange, shimmering light deep within the forest the previous night. Some thought it was a sign from the guardian, while others dismissed it as a trick of the moonlight. Arlen's heart raced with curiosity. At breakfast, he couldn't contain himself. "Gran, did you hear about the light? Do you think it's magic?" Iris set down her tea and smiled knowingly. "Perhaps the forest is trying to tell us something. But be cautious, Arlen. Not all magic is safe." Later that day, Arlen went to see his best friend, Kale, a cheerful boy with freckles and an endless supply of jokes. Kale was a year older than Arlen and slightly taller, with a mop of red hair and an unshakable curiosity. "Have you heard about the light?" Arlen asked excitedly. "Everyone's talking about it," Kale said, rolling his eyes. "My dad thinks it's fireflies, but I'm not so sure." Arlen leaned closer. "I'm going to find it. Tonight." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Are you serious? The forest at night is dangerous." "That's why you're coming with me," Arlen said with a grin. Kale groaned dramatically. "Fine. But if we get eaten by a bear, it's your fault." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over Elderglen, the two boys gathered supplies for their adventure. Arlen packed a small satchel with bread, cheese, and a flask of water. Kale brought a lantern and a slingshot, just in case, he said. The forest was quiet as they stepped under its canopy. The air was cool and filled with the earthy scent of moss and fallen leaves. As they ventured deeper, the trees grew taller and denser, their whispers growing louder, as though they were aware of the boys' presence. Shafts of golden light filtered through the leaves, and every now and then, they caught glimpses of small creatures scurrying out of sight. Squirrels with shimmering tails, rabbits with fur like spun silver, and birds with feathers that sparkled like jewels watched them curiously. "Did you see that?" Kale whispered, pointing to a fox with fur that glowed faintly in the twilight. Arlen nodded, a grin spreading across his face. I told you this would be amazing. Just as twilight descended, the boys stumbled upon a small clearing. In its center stood a majestic oak tree, its trunk so wide it would take 10 people to encircle it. Beneath its boughs sat a girl about their age. She had long silvery hair that seemed to glow in the dim light, and her eyes were the color of the forest after a rainstorm. Who are you? Arlen asked, stepping forward cautiously. The girl smiled warmly. My name is Lyria. I'm a friend of the forest. And you? I'm Arlen, and this is Kale, he replied. We're from Elderglen. We saw a strange light and came to investigate. Lyria's expression grew serious. The light you saw was no ordinary light. It came from the forest heart. Something is wrong. It's calling for help. Kale's eyes widened. The forest's heart is real. Lyria nodded. Yes, but it's in danger. A shadow has fallen over it, and its magic is fading. If it's not restored, the forest and everything in it will wither away. Arlen felt a surge of determination. How can we help? Lyria looked at him closely, her gaze piercing yet kind. The journey to the forest heart is perilous. You'll need courage, kindness, and trust in the forest. Will you come with me? Kale hesitated, glancing at Arlen. This sounds dangerous. It is, Lyria admitted. But the forest needs you. Arlen placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. We've always wanted an adventure, haven't we? Kale sighed and grinned weakly. All right, let's do this. The trio set off deeper into the forest, guided by Lyria. She seemed to know the woods intimately, leading them along hidden paths and over sparkling streams. As they walked, she explained that the shadow threatening the forest heart was caused by a creature known as the Umbra, a being of darkness born from fear and despair. Why would it attack the forest heart? Kale asked. Because it craves the magic, Lyria explained. Without light and hope to balance it, the Umbra grows stronger. Their journey was filled with trials. At one point, they had to cross a river guarded by mischievous sprites who demanded a riddle as payment. Lyria answered cleverly, earning their passage. Later, they encountered a grove of enchanted flowers that released a sleep-inducing pollen. Arlen used his scarf to shield his nose and helped his friends do the same. As they traveled, Lyria shared stories of the forest's wonders and tragedies. She spoke of dryads who once danced under the moonlight, of ancient battles fought to protect the woods, and of the Guardian, a being as old as the forest itself. The trio's journey into the depths of the whispering forest continued. As they ventured further, the air grew cooler, and a sense of ancient power surrounded them. The trees whispered more urgently, their voices carrying both warnings and encouragement. I never thought the forest would be this alive, Kale whispered, glancing around nervously. It's not just alive, Lyria replied, her voice soft but firm. It's watching us. Watching us. Kale squeaked. I don't like the sound of that. Arlen chuckled. Relax, Kale. If the forest didn't like us, we'd know by now. Lyria smiled but didn't say more. Her sharp eyes scanned the path ahead, her silvery hair catching the faint glow of bioluminescent moss lining the trail. As they crossed a dense grove, they stumbled upon a group of willow dryads, ethereal beings with skin like bark and hair cascading like golden vines. The dryads appeared distressed, their usual graceful forms flickering with an unnatural shadow. Stay back, one of the dryads warned, her voice like the rustle of leaves in the wind. The Umbra has touched this grove. It taints our home. Arlen stepped forward cautiously. We're here to help the forest. Can you tell us how to reach the forest heart? The Dryad regarded him with wary eyes, but seemed to sense his sincerity. The heart lies beyond the veiled glen, but the way is treacherous. The shadows grow stronger with each passing day. We'll make it, Arlen said, his voice resolute. The Dryads exchanged glances. Then one stepped forward and handed Lyria a small vial of glowing liquid. This is the essence of our grove. Use it wisely. It can dispel small shadows. Thank you, Lyria said, bowing deeply. Kale looked at the flickering Dryads with a mix of awe and sadness. Will you be okay? We endure, the Dryad replied, her voice heavy with sorrow. Go, children of light. Restore the balance. When they reached the veiled glen, the forest grew eerily silent. A thick mist clung to the ground, and shadowy figures flitted at the edges of their vision. I don't like this place, Kale muttered, clutching his slingshot tightly. Stay close, Lyria said. The mist can play tricks on your mind. As they moved cautiously, they began hearing whispers, not the soft murmurs of the trees, but darker, more insidious voices. You'll fail, one hissed. Turn back, another taunted. Your hearts are too weak. Arlen clenched his fists, his heart pounding. Ignore them. They're just trying to scare us. Suddenly, a shadow creature lunged from the mist, a writhing mass of darkness with glowing red eyes. Kale yelped and fired a stone from his slingshot, but it passed harmlessly through the creature. Use the essence. Lyria shouted. Arlen quickly uncorked the vial and splashed the glowing liquid toward the shadow. The creature screeched and dissolved into the mist. That was too close, Kale said, his voice shaking. They'll only get stronger the closer we get, Lyria warned. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a massive stone archway entwined with glowing vines. Beyond it, they could see a faint, pulsing light. The forest's heart, Lyria said, her voice filled with awe. But as they stepped closer, a deep, resonant voice boomed, stopping them in their tracks. Who dares approach the heart? From the shadows emerged a towering figure cloaked in shimmering leaves and bark-like armor. Its eyes glowed with a soft green light, and its presence radiated both power and sorrow. The Guardian, Arlen whispered. Why have you come? The Guardian demanded, its voice carrying the weight of centuries. Lyria stepped forward. The heart is in danger. The Umbra is draining its magic. We've come to help. The Guardian studied them silently for a moment before speaking. The forest has chosen you, but the heart's trial is not for the faint of heart. Are you prepared to face your fears and prove your worth? Arlen nodded firmly. We're ready. The Guardian stepped aside, revealing the forest's heart, a crystalline tree glowing with a pulsing, golden light. Its roots were entwined with dark tendrils that seemed to leech its energy. As they approached, the heart's light dimmed and the tendrils began to writhe. Shadows coalesced into the form of the Umbra, a monstrous figure with glowing red eyes and clawed hands. You cannot defeat me, the Umbra hissed, its voice dripping with malice. I am born from fear and despair. You are but children. We're more than that, Arlen said, stepping forward. We're hope. The Umbra roared and lunged, its shadowy form engulfing the clearing. The Guardian raised its arms, forming a protective barrier of light around the heart. Face your fears, the Guardian commanded. Only then can you banish the Umbra. The boys and Lyria each found themselves surrounded by visions of their deepest fears. Kale saw himself lost and alone in a dark forest, while Lyria faced the sorrow of the forest withering away. Arlen stood before a towering shadow that mocked his bravery. "You're not real," Arlen said, his voice trembling but determined. "You're just fear, and fear doesn't win." Summoning all his courage, he reached for the glowing pendant his grandmother had given him, a simple stone etched with runes of protection. The pendant began to glow brightly, and the light spread, dispelling the shadows around him. "Kale, Lyria, focus on the light," Arlen shouted. Kale and Lyria drew strength from Arlen's resolve, breaking free of their fears. Together, they joined hands, their combined light pushing back the Umbra. With a final deafening screech, the Umbra shattered into countless specks of darkness that dissolved into the air. The tendrils retreated from the heart, and its golden light blazed brighter than ever. The Guardian stepped forward, its expression one of gratitude. "You have done what many could not. The heart is safe, and the balance is restored." As the light spread through the forest, the whispers turned to songs of joy, and the once shadowed glades filled with life and color. Dryads, animals, and even the mischievous sprites emerged to celebrate. "You were right, Gran," Arlen whispered, looking up at the glowing heart. "The forest really does trust those who are brave and kind." When they returned to Eldaglen, the villagers greeted them as heroes. Ira hugged Arlen tightly, her eyes shining with pride. "I knew you had it in you, my little explorer." Kale grinned. "You can call us the saviors of the forest now." Lyria stayed for a while, teaching the villagers how to care for the forest and ensure its magic remained strong. When it was time for her to leave, she promised to return one day. As Arlen lay in bed that night, he thought about the journey, the friend he had made, and the courage he had found within himself. The forest's whispers lulled him to sleep, carrying with them a promise of more adventures to come.